Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar to do with gyms and health industry in general. So I'd like to give a special thanks to Sue Elson and Dorianne Lyons, who's our new Business Development Manager at Spectrum Analysis. It's been interesting to hear over the past 12 months how all our government leaders are talking about using data and making their decisions based on data, which I think is fantastic. So I'd like to thank Dan Andrews and all the other ones because they're finally doing what we've said we should be doing for years. So Spectrum's motto has always been using data to make better business decisions, no matter what that is. This applies to our larger customers, people like Aussie Home Loans, F45 Training, 7-Eleven, right down to much smaller customers that are just wanting to open a territory, open a gymnasium, doing whatever they wish to do. So it's very, very applicable to the health industry. We're also very big believers that people should have a strategic network plan. And the strategic plan really relies on accurate data to make a decent plan. And our idea of a strategic plan is, if you think of it as both a qualitative and a quantitative view, we are all about the quantitative. We're all about the numbers. How many people live in the area, what demographic they are, and therefore use that sort of information to make good decisions going forward. I'd like to come onto my slides and we'll see from there. Okay, so I wanted to start off by welcoming you obviously to our webinar, which could run for up to an hour. You all probably know who I am. Anyway, I'm the Managing Director of Spectrum Analysis. I've just put in our entry for the Supplier of the Year with the FCA, and I had to actually admit to we've been going for over 25 years. So I've been around in this game for a long time. I'd just like to also introduce you more formally to Dorianne. Dorianne is now our Business Development Manager at Spectrum, and she's going to drive the questions in the chat, and very happy to discuss anything with you as we move forward.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, now the agenda for today, I've put this out for you, is a bit of a discussion about the census, a bit of a talk about ABS data, population forecasting, and then some specific things like CEFA, territories or exclusion zones, strategic decisions. I then really want to show you some web-based or online mapping, which we are using in a lot of different cases. And now our new drive time material, which really helps you be able to see how far people are coming. So I'd like to start off with data to understand from the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics. So they run a census every 5 years. And the last census cost over $400 million. It's actually the biggest event the Australian government does in peacetime. It was quite funny because the previous one they thought was doing for about 400 million. That worked out. The last one, they thought they'd be smart and save some money, took the cheap way out. It all fell apart, as you might recall. And they, instead of doing it for 360 million, it probably cost them 450 because they then had to spend 90 million going back, patching it all up because of all the web crashed on census night. Anyway, hopefully they won't have that problem again. Census night, as you'll start to hear, will be the 10th of August this year. Now, from census, we start getting a lot of information, but we're expecting the main part of the information we need at the level we work at to come out about May, June next year. That's the official ABS view. Now they'll start putting out numbers late this year saying total population of Australia and state by state, but that doesn't help. We need to get it right down to the SA1 level, of which I'll talk about in a minute. So that helps us look at things like actual numbers of people, ethnicity, average household income, language spoken at home, many, many different types of things get picked up in the census. And you'll all become experts at that in the next couple of months because you'll have to fill your census out. So that gets us every 5 years a really good stake in the ground. The second big part of ABS data that we use is population forecasting. And the ABS normally take a 5-year cycle, and it finally came out in October 2019 because basically the Department of Health say back to the Prime Minister, we need good information of population projections to tell you where to put hospitals. So in October 2019, they released by 5-year groups by male, female, and then 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, right up to 100. What the population forecasts are expected to be each year for each area out from 2017 to 2032. And we use that as the gold medal to us because you can go and play around with state government data and all sorts of other things. But at the end of the day, this is the Australian Bureau of Statistics taking in feedback from every council, every state government, and eventually putting together one set of numbers for ScoMo to say this is what we expect the population to look like over the next few years. Now, we do know at this stage there is no coronavirus effect, but they're saying that by 2032, the population will probably be down about 4% on what they're estimating. So if they're estimating the population at the moment in 2021 is around 25 million, they're probably estimating it to be about 32 million by 2032. And they're now saying, well, look, that'll just probably be down 4% on what we thought. Why we're not making any big changes on that yet is federal politics could change that. They only need to decide to lift up migration numbers, whatever, and they'll get back to the numbers they're expecting anyway. So even though we're doing a lot with different groups, other things like that, we're not in the mood to sort of try and over-predict the ABS. But the beauty is for things like gyms and groups like that, we can actually say how many people by age and gender are in each area and therefore what's expected to be there as we go forward up to 2032. Gender normally doesn't worry us, but when we do some work for people like Zadi or Fernwood, obviously it's very, very female orientated. So just giving you an idea of when the ABS come out with their information, they call it Standard Area 1, and there's 57,523 Standard Area 1s across Australia. So each SA1, as we call it, has on average between 250 and 800 people. So this is the smallest accurate level that the ABS collect data at. So an SA1 is probably a couple of blocks around where you live, and we can therefore tell at that area average income, how many people, age, gender, profession, all sorts of things. SA1s then fit into SA2s. Now, to give you an idea, most cases in your brain, think of an SA2 as approximately a postcode. So in Australia, there's 2,630 postcodes and 2,310 SA2s. In most metropolitan areas, the two are very close to identical. But when you get out into regional areas, often there have to be more postcodes because physically the distance between towns, each town has a post office, it therefore has to have a postcode. So out in the regional areas, it might be one SA2 might have 3 or 4 postcodes within it, especially when we're out around Meekatharra or something crazy like that. Why we're showing SA2s is a lot of the government data is reported at SA2 level, including all this work on population predictions. They're not as simple as to say, oh, we're doing that at postcode or suburbs. They actually do it at SA2s. So we can see there is a slight difference to say postcodes, but pretty negligible in the scheme of things. So the 2,310 SA2s fit into 360 SA3s. And sometimes there are levels of data that come out by government, some health department things that just come out at SA3 level. SA3s actually fit into about 100 SA4s. SA4s then fit into states. So that's the way they set it all up in Australia. But just to give you an idea, there are about 8,000 suburbs, 2,630 postcodes. And to be honest, ABS might think they know a lot talking SA1s, SA2s and SA3s, but you as people who actually have to talk to clients and customers tend to talk in postcodes and suburbs. So we can work with all of those different things if we have to. The next thing I want to talk about is SEIFA, Socio-Economic Index for Areas. People always say to us, like, what's the socio-economic of an area? And I always say, well, you can judge it many different ways. Like I might say it's the average household income. Dorianne might say it's the price of their house has a very strong indication. Sue might say level of unemployment is probably a very good correlating factor to higher, lower socioeconomic. The very nice people at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, once every 5 years, shuffle all the information together and come up with a score for every area in Australia. So Mr. and Mrs. Average live at an area right down to an SA1 that is basically 1,000. One standard deviation, 1,100 points, is obviously fairly good places. 1,200 is 2 standard deviations to the good side. And then if you go much past 1,200, you might be living next door to where Kerry Packer used to live in Bellevue Hill or somewhere in the middle of Toorak. Similarly, the other way, 900 is getting a little bit lower socioeconomic, 800 is getting fairly low, and you're tending to be out in the country with those sort of areas, partly because the price of housing and the cost of living is often lower in the country than it is in Melbourne, in the main cities. The point is, what the SEIFA does is it gives us a way of comparing apples to apples. So if I'm looking at a suburb in Adelaide or a suburb in Sydney or a suburb in Melbourne, I can actually think in terms of what is the ABS's view of what that score for that area is to compare like with like. So if I'm looking in high areas in Adelaide, I might be thinking of Unley or something like that. It probably won't compare to Toorak or Bellevue Hill in Sydney, but it'll compare pretty well to a lot of other higher socio-economic areas in Melbourne or Sydney. So the SEIFA is the best way we find, and I'll show you this in some mapping coming forward, of comparing apples to apples and knowing what the socio-economics of an area is going to be. The next thing I want to touch on, especially for gyms and studios, is territories. We do a lot of work in territories, and I like to call it exclusion zones or marketing areas. Unfortunately, in Australia, we call everything a territory. We are trying to change that with people's minds because to us, if you can think of it as 3 different levels, a territory is something we have to give someone like Aussie Home Loans. Now, Aussie Home Loans may have a call centre. You ring in and you ask to get a loan. You'd be pretty annoyed if you found out you were the franchisee for that area and they didn't get it pretty right. And instead of you getting the job, might be Sue is the franchisee for that area. They gave it to me. I ended up getting the $20,000 commission for that loan because, oh, well, sorry, the mapping wasn't quite correct. So when we have call centres, we have to be extremely accurate because that actually is distinguishing where the customer's going to go. I think we'd all agree in gyms and health industry, it's not that tight. You basically aren't going to say to somebody, don't come to my gym, you've got to go to that one over this side because you live on the other side of a certain road. What I always say is bricks and mortar, gyms, things like that, really what you're selling is an exclusion zone. All the franchisee is wanting is a security that you're not going to open another one in their backyard. So we like to think of exclusion zones as being an area probably defined by a postcode. If you want to, it can be defined by a radius or whatever geographic area we want to do. But exclusion zones, again, often called territories, really get written into the agreement, into your franchise agreement to say, this is the area that we're not going to open another site within. You have the exclusivity to be the only site in that area. Or maybe it even says, and you can open a second one in that area, we don't mind. But at the end of the day, if I was the franchisee paying my money, I want to know somebody else isn't going to open one in that area. The lower level of this is something called marketing areas, which we suggest be pretty loose. And that could be, look, you drop letterbox fly, drop into that area, we'll drop them into this area. But look, if things change a bit, we'll move one area or another from one side to the other. That's pretty non-defined, but still needs a sort of logic. We've got one client at the moment that's actually going to give their stores a part of the online sales. So they sell a lot of nutrition products online, and they've had enough stirring coming in from their stores saying this is no good, you're taking our business. They're actually allocating every postcode so that some contribution will go to each store based on the online sales, so that they want the stores to actually be encouraging the business and not trying to go into conflict with it. So again, it's not written into the franchise agreement, but it'll be something separate they're going to provide. So I'm always one saying for especially the health and gym industry, we really should be providing exclusion zones. And they should be worked out on a logical manner. Possibly, we do a lot for the industry, as you know. Maybe it's to do with a certain age group. Might be 16 to 50-year-olds, or it might be females over 40 for something like Fernwood. Whatever people want to use their definition, it's not up to us, but we're very happy to work with it and use the data. So at the end of the day, what I say with territory planning is you want to be able to stand in front of a group of franchisees in the future and say each territory was created to give each franchise a similar opportunity, similar amount of demand, and therefore that's how your territory has been defined. Now, it's really interesting when we get to doing territories. We'll start off by saying before we define a territory and actually put a hard line around it, we like to do what we call a trading area. We at Spectrum have what's called geocoding software. So we can take the address of every person that goes to a gym and put a dot on the map to represent that person or those people. So very typically of a 24/7 type gym, this is one here, we would get about 80% of the people coming from within 2. And remembering we've done this for a lot without throwing too many big names in, but we've played this, looked at ones to do with, I'll say the Jets group, some Anytime Fitness work, things like that. So without giving away anything confidential, anybody who's got a 24/7, it's probably operating, best part of 80% of the customers are coming from within 2Ks, and you'll always get other people that, hey, I happen to work nearby or I happen to go to a uni nearby. But if this was middle metropolitan, and we've sort of thrown this one around our own office here, this is what we tend to see for a 24/7 type gym. If we move that to an HIIT type gym, could be a F45 or a BodyFit or something of that nature, we would tend to expect to see probably 70% coming from within 3 kilometres, and people are a bit more chasing that specific type of training, so they'll go further to get what they want to get. Now, even when we get to things like we're doing one at the moment to do with pole dancing, well, it only has about 7 or 8 here in Melbourne. Of course, people are coming from a lot further, but as they expand and get more of their gyms going, I would expect if they achieve something like 15 or 20 across Melbourne, they'd be coming into this sort of HIIT idea of probably 70% getting within 3K. When we go to the full service gym, people really are chasing, they're happy to drive further to do it. It's probably more like, 60 or even 70% coming from within 5K. So people are coming for other reasons. They've got an attachment to that location, or they're following a specific trainer. They're probably much more wider. So when you start thinking about how far apart gyms should be, I like to think of it like the old Venn diagrams you did when you were probably at school. Let me just go back a couple. That if I'm looking at something like a 24/7 gym and I'm getting 60 or 80% coming within 2K, I probably could have two of these gyms 4 kilometres or 3.5 kilometres apart. So the Venn diagrams are overlapping a little bit. And to be honest, they will still say that a lot of their business is coming from that area, but you're always going to have that. I remember quoting a legend in franchising, Chris Malcolm, and Chris ran and still is very major with, he sold out now, but Clark Rubber, been going for years. And Chris used to say to me in his slightly distinguished voice, Peter, I can open a site in Alice Springs and somebody in Sydney will still complain. And that's just typical of franchising. When we used to do a lot of work for KFC, they had a basic rule that said, let's look at an area, let's see who's going to be affected. If we think more than 10% is going to be affected from the new site opening, we'll offer the franchisee first option on taking that new site. If they got that much under 10%, they'd say, too bad. It's a part of life. It's a part of doing business. You're always going to have somebody affected. And we see it all the time. Our view is don't overreact. Yes, some business may lose 5%, but you normally can then say, look, we've lost a little bit of business, but there's more money in the advertising and there's more ads on TV. It's always going to happen that way. It's always the old problem of not in my backyard. Everybody loves to hear, oh, we're opening more gyms or things in our franchise system, but don't open one near me. And our point to that is, please don't overreact to it. But if you look at a trade area like we've done here, and you say, well, how far out are we going to get 60, 70% of our customers? Then probably a bit under double that area is a realistic distance to put the sites apart. Now, we also have a bit of work we've done here, which we call inner, middle and outer. So inner areas, obviously in Melbourne and Sydney, where you've really got high density, sure, they can be closer together. Middle areas is middle metropolitan. And we actually have a definition that says inner areas are where you're getting approximately 90,000 people within 3K. That's where you got it tight and you can be more gymnasiums in close to each other. Middle is typically the middle areas of, in Melbourne, the Vermonts, in Sydney might be the Castle Hills and those sort of areas, and you're probably getting about 60,000 people within 3 kilometres. That sort of means you can, they can be a bit further apart. By the time we go to the outer areas, and then we're starting to see it more like 30 or 40,000 people per 3 kilometre radius, then yes, we end up at 8 or 10 kilometres apart. But again, once you plot the actual customers and see how far you have to go to get, say, 60 or 70% of the customers, it starts to define itself. And then you can make good, logical decisions about what is a reasonable trade area and inevitably what sort of exclusion zones or territories you wish to set up. Okay. Now, we at Spectrum have discovered or found a company we really like out of Berlin, believe it or not, and they are the gurus of drive times. Why we like their drive times is you start off doing drive time, and the original work used to be, and I can remember doing this through MapInfo, and they'd say, well, what's the speed limit? Let's just run at that speed limit. So if I was looking, I remember doing an example from our old office in Hawthorn, and it said you could get into the centre of Melbourne in just over 5 minutes. Now, at that time, many years ago, I was challenging that Michael Schumacher would have troubled to get there in 5 minutes in a Formula One car. The minor problem that you had to go through 15 sets of traffic lights was never taken up in this. What this company does is they literally have different average speeds for different types of roads. And we see it that a typical road like Canterbury Road or a call it a major road, is probably running at 40 kilometres an hour. They then run to smaller roads at about 30 kilometres an hour. And if you're coming along a freeway, they're running that at about 90 kilometres an hour. So it's actually like pouring a bit of water down and seeing how far out it'll go. And as you can see, it actually defines how far you would literally go along each road to make that time. So from our office, you can see on the right-hand side, it would take you to just near Elgar Road, and that'd be about right. If I jumped in my car now, 3 minutes, I'd probably get to Elgar Road. If I went in the other direction, it would stop me just near Stanhope Grove. Again, reality check says to me that's about right. And it works like that in all directions. And you can see it's even got a little bit of a glitch in here that sort of says you'd have to come a bit further to get around, to get into that pocket than in other areas. It works very well. But if you think of typical, as you go further out, you start thinking it becomes a bit like a square or rhombus at about 45 degrees. So that's what they show us at 3 kilometres. If we do, this is now a 5 kilometre from our office, and as you can see, it's taking us further out Union Road, further out Canterbury Road. It's actually working on what the time would be to get to that corner, what the time would be to go to these different positions. Even out some little street here, it would get to there, then it would stop. So it works really well for that. And I've lost one. We had a 10 kilometre one. Sorry, I'm just come back. So we can do this in any time frame we want. So you might say, look, my group think we should be working in 5-minute drive times, and overlay that to things like the trade areas that you've defined. You might be a full serve gym and you say, well, we really think we need to be a 10-minute timelines. Then we can obviously put the 10-minute one up as well. Sorry, I'll show you that when we get to the web-based mapping. So just summarising, we really are all about and helping, or what people need to be thinking about is what they can do, looking at trade areas and defining territories or exclusion zones based on facts and data, not just seemed like a good idea and I had a text to colour and a big pen. So good brands that are thinking expansion really should be thinking of what we call strategic network planning. And it's not about site selection. It's not saying, oh, at that location, I need that store, not that store. To us, it's all about prioritising areas. So if we're doing strategic network planning, we're saying, okay, you might have 10 sites already in Melbourne. Where would you go for the next 5, the following 5, and then the ones after that? So we call them tier 1. They're our next set of priorities. After a few of those have been done, maybe we've got to elevate some tier 2 sites up. Maybe when a few more of those are done, we then elevate tier 3. So you imagine you get that new franchisee walks in and says, I love what you do. I want one of your gyms. Where can I open it? Well, obviously you'd say, well, we've got 5 tier 1 areas we think we should be going to. Why don't we start looking there? What you don't want to be doing is they say, oh, I live in an area out the back of whoop whoop. You've looked at it and you said, oh, we don't even think it's a tier 3 area, but maybe in 5 years' time. What you're trying to do is encourage them to go where you want them to go. I've always been a big one saying we should always in our area and site selection be proactive and not reactive. Too many times we come up across businesses that they're spread out everywhere. We say, how did that happen? And inevitably it's, oh, look, that franchisee wanted to go here and this one wanted to go there. And we followed, we allowed them to do it. And I've even had cases where a big Tasmanian company, they then had 2 franchises in Queensland, 2 in Melbourne, and one of the Melbourne ones was at Mornington, or you couldn't have been further away from Tullamarine Airport if you tried. And I said, how do you service them? Oh, well, somebody gets on a plane once a month and flies to Brisbane, and then someone else flies down to Melbourne to just do two sites. It really was ineffective. What you really want to be doing is trying to be grouping them together where you can and able to manage and service sites as best you can. So all about saying strategic network planning for your areas is being proactive and not reactive, and having a plan of where you want to go and having an understanding of what makes a good area. So you may have already thought about it, you may not, but not every area is good for your business. If you're a full service type gym, you probably want higher socio-economic. You probably need to be in areas where people can afford your services. If you're a 24/7, you probably are very broad. You can go into lower socio-economic areas because people are prepared to pay that lower amount just to have access. But that's what you've got to think about, and then think about who is there, who are the other clients, who are the other competitors, and can that business sustain can that area sustain your business? So once we get down to saying we're into tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3, we like to think of it in terms of site selection. And we're very much involved in analysing and helping people say, what is your network and who are the drivers of your business? Now, there's probably 4 or 5 drivers. It might be a certain number of people of a certain age group, certain number of people of a reasonable socio-economic in that area. Might be a negative to competition. If there's 4 other 24/7s all tightly in that area, you might not want to become the 5th. If there is no others in that area, you might say, fantastic, I want to become the 1st. We don't really know yet, but what we're trying to then do is say, how do we actually look at 4 or 5 different locations, sites, and actually say which one you want is going to be the best? And we do that by often setting up a check chart. It might be a simple thing of ticking some boxes, giving a bit of a score or weighting, and then ending up with a score to say, look, that site scored a 35, that only scored a 32, that was a 15, and oh, this one over here scored a 40. And what that does is it becomes tailored to your business. You might want certain things. You might need a certain amount of parking. Everybody wants parking. Everybody wants visibility. Everybody wants access. But you may need to have or want different weightings of those. You might want specific size of your gym. You might have something like the one we're doing for the pole dancing company that need obviously reasonable structure. You can't just stick a dancing pole up and hang it from a sky hook. It's got to have decent ability to stick into the roof. All those sorts of things. Once you've got some ideas of what the drivers of your business, you can actually have some sales prediction tools. Now, sales prediction could be number of members, could be total dollars revenue, but you may all know I came from 20 years in Caltex. When we did a service station, we always needed to predict how many litres we were going to sell and what dollars we were going to sell through our convenience stores. Doesn't matter what we're trying to predict. All we're trying to do is have some logic as a franchisor to say, we should go ahead with this site because of we internally expected sales to be whatever. What you're not doing is passing that on to the franchisee. That is franchise suicide. If you do that and you say, oh, mate, you're going to take this site and it's going to have 1,000 members and do $50,000 a month, and then it doesn't, you end up in a very big litigation or legal case and you have to practice adding your honour onto the end of every sentence. We have been expert witnesses in a couple of those cases, never for our client, of where it normally came down to the franchisor had made some sort of statements to the franchisee and the judge ended up ruling that they really didn't have a decent logic to do it. So when it comes to sales prediction, you can't tell somebody what they're going to do in your proposed site. What you can tell them is what the other sites are doing, and what you can do internally is come up with your own sales prediction of what the new site's going to do, and you then make a go or no-go decision on whether you're going to go ahead with it. We used to spend about 60 days at Caltex working on a package that would become, obviously we needed multiple $1 million approval, but by the time we said we were going to build a site, we had spent about 60 man days on doing a full-blown final approval, modelling and all sorts of financial modelling to say we should go ahead. I'm not expecting people to do that level. What I am doing is saying people should have some sort of tools so that if you're the CEO and you're signing off that we're going to go ahead with that site, there is some logic on how you get there. Maybe you've kept a bit of a file And then if you do have a problem, you're able to go back and say, well, hang on, we took these steps and we were able to come to this conclusion that it should work out. And as I say, most of us in business are about minimizing risk. Some of you may even have boards, and that board, the first thing that should come up in a board meeting is often, what risks are we likely to be taking? I joke with people, sometimes we should be called Spectrum Insurance, but not too worried about that. But what we're trying to do is give you some logic to say, this is our whole business is about, so you think you've got some logic on when you're going to open a new site, what data and facts and data have been brought in to say it should be a success. I now want to take you into a bit of online mapping in a minute. And mapping has changed tremendously in the last probably 5 years. 5 years ago, we were all mucking around with a bit of Google Maps. And if you wanted to go to something really tailored to your business, it was incredibly expensive. And unfortunately, it's a bit like the unicorn. Everybody thought they wanted it. Everybody thought it existed. And in most cases, it didn't. And it was always hard to explain. We could do things at our end of the world because we ran Map Basic. Map Basic is like a Formula One car, and Map Basic needs a Formula One driver to drive it. And it costs about $40,000 to buy. So a lot of the things we'd show people, they said, why can't we do that also? And the answer was they didn't try and run a Map Info type system. Some companies did try to run Map Infos, and to be honest, we've got 3 or 4 clients that ditched it, came back and said, that's too hard, we can't do that. Just get it so it works and we can see it. So we're not trying to become gym instructors, the same as you probably don't want to become a mapping guru. But what we're going to show you is some mapping that is much more very easy to use, and we can do that for people either as a bulk group or for specific brands, even bringing in individual membership for it. Now, some of you may know we do a lot of work for schools, and we've had set all this mapping up for schools as well. So certain schools have all their students mapped, all their alumni mapped, all their future enrollments, and they can really do a lot of analysis. When we do this mapping, we'll often think in terms of being able to see your members, your clubs. We'd like to think we can tailor it for multi-layers, so you can see the CEFA layers, population density, where the growth is going to be with numbers. And some of our clients, and it's a pretty common way of doing it, no secret here, it's really only 4 things a territory can be. It's either sold, it's available, it's reserved hopefully with a time frame. Yes, that's reserved for 6 months or whatever you decide. And then you may even have some no-go zones because you promised somebody you won't open a new one in that area for 5 years. All I say to people is you do decide to have no-go zones and you've made some commitment to another franchisee, you must have a time issue. You've got to have a closing time. You've got to say that's a no-go zone for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. So you can eventually bring it back into the system and be able to say, this is what's going to happen. Now, I'm going to bring up some online mapping, and other things we show are things like direct competitors. We can have shopping centres and shopping demographics. We can have all the population forecasts and all the socio-economics. Bear with me a sec. Hopefully we're seeing the mapping. Okay, so let me just start by saying it's a very simple system where, let me bring it up to the top. So turn everything off. I had it open a few minutes ago. So let's start off that all you have to know to do one of these systems is it works like Google. You move things with your pointer. You can helicopter in and helicopter out, or zoom in and zoom out. I'm just using the scroller on the top of my mouse. First thing is all you need to know is you turn things on and off with these ticks on the right-hand side. So if I want some information, I'll get to that in one sec, but let me work through. So let's imagine this is Spectrum is a gym or something in Surrey Hills. We can turn on the 3-minute drive time. I can turn on the 5-minute drive time. And I've even had Assel prepare me a 10-minute drive time. So I can turn those on or off as I want. To say, well, let's look at all my current gyms. Let's put a 5-minute drive time around them. Let's see how far out we go. Now, I might also say I'm a 24/7 gym. Let's actually look at my membership. I can turn off that drive time, but this could be my membership that says with a 2-kilometre radius, I'm fairly tight. And I look at my 3-minute drive time and I say, well, maybe I need to be looking at the 5-minute drive time. I'm probably covering 80% of my membership at a 5-minute drive time. Again, if I have other gyms in my system, I can put a 5-minute drive time around every one, and I can look for where are the big gaps where I'm obviously not covering that I should be looking at. Now, again, I can say that that's the 5-minute, that's typical for a 24/7. This will be more typical for an HIT type thing where it's a bit wider. And if I went out to a full service, it's probably a bit more like that. I'm not saying I've perfectly knowledge of which one's which or how far they're out, but that's our view of it. Now, we can also throw in all the competitors. So I've got my little gym here. I very quickly go in, you can see it's coming down, it just brings it up. There is a Zap gym in Surrey Hills. There's Body Fit nearby here at down in Canterbury Road. We can have any, we've actually mapped some thousands of gyms across Australia, and we can even add all the little individual ones within reason to it. But it allows you to say, where am I and where are my competitors within reason? And then you can see how it shrinks down. So if I was a Jets, I could be looking at who's my near competitors around me. Do I want to open another one in certain areas? I'm going to turn that off and I want to go to some demographics. Now, I've said to you how, in my view, we have a scale that says basically the highest is the dark blue, the lowest is almost the black. So if I look across the whole of Melbourne, and we can do this anywhere across Australia, this gives us a fairly good idea that the highest socio-economic is here, bit up here, along the beach. And when I want to actually look at it, I can see the score. So Glen Iris is rating at 1142, very good. Brighton is, should come up, 1144, even better. But if I come back a little bit, I'm probably now going into East Brighton. 1123, it's dropping down a bit. Black Rock. 1133. So they're the dark blues are the top 20%. If I go to the light blues, I'm down in the 1072. The whites are coming in at 1026. Then if I go into the pinks, the next group down, 964, and eventually I'll get to the lowest group, 888. So hopefully what you get there is you can look at any area for its socio-demographic and work out what suits you and what may not suit you but may suit others. So I said the 24/7s probably can go anywhere. A lot of the full service ones may need to stay in higher socio-demographic. We might like to look at population density. You're always wanting to know where the people are. You want to see high population, and then you can just as quickly throw over the top of it all the competitors and help look for where there are gaps in the network. So as you would expect, the highest population probably in Melbourne, well, South Wharf here. We've done it at, bad example. We'll come back to South Bank. So it's actually showing there's 11,000 people per square kilometre, and that's obviously due to all the high-rise accommodation. Get out to middle normality. We're out near Camberwell, 2,700 people per square kilometre, pretty high. As we go out further, probably a low one, 1,300. You can see, you can really get a feeling of what sort of population density you're looking at by the time we're out of Belgrave South. Again, these areas often they're not fully developed, or they've got a lot of trees and forests around them. So they start to drop off. Now, the really important one I want to show you is what is the population projections going forward. So we've used the ABS's data, and again, we've put our colour scheme in that shows highest growth. And I'm going to take ourselves over near Werribee in Victoria. This is some of the highest growth corridor in Australia. So if I look at it this way, it actually tells me that I'm in Truganina now. Truganina is expected of 20 to 44-year-olds to go from around 14,000 in 2017 to 20,000 to 26,000 to 30,000. It's going to grow by 16,000 people aged 20 to 44 over that time period, over that 15-year time period, and it's going to grow by 115%. So let's say I was doing a bit of analysis of that area. Let me just bring it in closer. I might want to say, well, who else is in there already? So let's just throw in the competitors. So at this stage, I've got an F45. I've got, see which that one is. There's an Anytime. You know, it's really open for probably a lot more gyms to come in there in the near future. Next to it is Truganina, is Tarneit. Tarneit, again, is going to grow by 12,000 people. Again, huge opportunity. And then we come up into some of these areas, even though we're still growing by 4,000 people. Hanley's going to grow by 2,000. You get the feeling you can really start seeing where the population growth is going to be. Now, often you get the old areas that have been going for, I use Mill Park as an example. Sydney, it might be somewhere in the Baulkham Hills or something, where mum and dad, the place was built 30 years ago, mum and dad are still living there, empty nesting, and you actually find the population could be dropping. Like 20 to 45-year-olds in Mill Park North, it's going to go from 6,500 to 6,200. So even though there are quite a few gyms in there, you wouldn't probably be wanting to jump in and try to build 5 more. Yet you head up further north, and now into what's called the Doreen corridor, and again, we're starting to see, 13,000 more people just coming into this area, and it doesn't, according to our records at the moment, have a gym even in there. It's similar over here in the Wollert one. This is this Melbourne North corridor. So you start getting some really good information about where you should be thinking about expanding your network. And you could be, and I'll say, and we did aim this at the health industry as well as gyms and different areas. You could be someone like one of our clients, Keyser Training. Keyser are much more about older people and rehabilitation. They probably want to know where, again, the older people are going to be. Well, probably not surprising, my area up near Wallert's still going to kick in very strongly for them. But coming back down into Melbourne, area like Hawthorn, going to go up by 33,300 people. Yet some of the outer growth areas may not, well, just, it's not, 45-year-olds, not old, as I say myself, extremely young. You really can start being able to define where these areas are going to be. So what I'm hopefully have been able to show you a bit is that this web-based mapping systems can be catered for your type of operation and can be used with certain other data we put in it to make much better business decisions than just sort of thinking about this type of thing. Now, I also point out that this works Australia-wide. And in fact, we use this is called Mango Maps. Many of you would know we do F45 worldwide, and we actually run Mango Maps in over 60 different countries around the world with their mapping. Some others like Studio Pilates, I don't know who's on this call at the moment, we run their mapping worldwide. They're often opening a new one here in England or a new thing in America, and they get us to set up their territories almost on call, but at least we know we've got the data they want. We've already set up the whole of the United States, all of the United Kingdom with similar data to Australia, and we can then go in and say, oh, we want a few territories around Chicago or a few territories around London, and we can cut those up based on facts and data, similar level of data to what we use in Australia. Okay, so I'm going to just flick back to my slide. Bear with me one sec. So just wanting to put in here the online mapping I showed you. We can obviously have all your direct competitors. We have data that shows all shopping centres and shopping strips. So if your aim is, you might be something that goes into a shopping centre. You may say, we really want to open in shopping centres. We can identify all those, and not only identify them, we also know what the gross leasable area retail, what the moving annual turnover, what the total pedestrian count is estimated to be. This is called the Property Council data. So if you're saying, look, I want to know how big Castle Hill is versus High Point here in Melbourne versus Chadstone and Marion in Adelaide, we've got all the data around that, and we can even demonstrate that in the online mapping. Obviously, the demographics I showed were just a simple part, mainly concentrating on population forecast, but we can put all sorts of other demographics if you want them, like percentage of people speaking certain languages or whatever we want to see. Obviously, I showed the 2017-2032 mapping data forecast, which at the moment is still the most current. We're hoping the ABS might do an upgrade post-coronavirus rather than just sit for 5 years, but it hasn't happened yet. And finally, the socio-economic can be done. We can put in the demographics, average household income, etc., or we can use CEFA, which is what our view is the best single way of looking at it Australia-wide. So understanding available information leads to making good business decisions. Understanding and doing the mapping gives us a really good way of seeing our current membership, our current competitors, all sorts of information to make good business decisions. Having a reasonable trade area understanding gives you much more information to do your exclusion zones or territories, whichever you wish to call them. And identify the future growth area really shows you where to market. And one of the things we talk about in doing territories, I call it the checkerboard approach, is don't be scared to have a few too many territories. You can always lend them out to somebody, but you can't take them back. As someone said to me, giving a franchisee a territory and then trying to tell them you're going to take it back is like giving a 3-year-old an ice cream, letting them have a couple of licks and then say, I want that ice cream back. The big tantrum is what always comes out of it. So we're always about thinking about this stuff up front, maybe planning territories 10 years out, knowing where those growth areas are. Even if you have a couple of territories that someone else is caretaking, at least you know you're ready for the future. And I guess our motto has always been using data to make better business decisions and making it so that it's advisable, you can explain it to your franchisees, and it's defendable if you ever have to go down that way. Okay, so I'm going to throw it open to questions, and please be ready to unmute if you wish. And I'm going to hand over to Dorianne to drive from here, hopefully.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Peter. I'm just checking mainly the questions, the direct messages that have come through during your presentation have been about the recording. And I just want to assure everyone that a recording will be sent, including all of the presentation. But obviously any specific questions that you have about the mapping now that you'd like Peter to address, please feel free to pop into the chat.
Or just turn on your microphone and tell me about it.
Or just talk, yes.
Just talk.
Peter, there's an interesting comment that Ingrid Thompson's made. She just mentioned that it was so interesting about the spread of franchises. Starbucks ran into this issue when they first came to Australia in 2000. not a franchise. They couldn't replicate here the same site selection business model that had worked in US cities. So do you know how it's done differently in the US?
Well, I actually know more than that. I know how Starbucks got going because we were asked to do some work on it originally. And the guy, Adam Davison, a friend of mine, was their manager. The problem they find in the US to Australia, not just food industry, their labour costs are way dearer than ours are way dearer than theirs. And so many businesses like Starbucks and these come out to Australia with their model that is saying, we do it this way, but it's based on about $7 an hour for their labour rates. And they get Australian things where they get double time and a half at $45 an hour, and their model just falls on its head. And we've been involved in watching a lot of those. Now, Starbucks, I guess, I laughed at it at the time and said to my friend Adam Davison, "You're joking." And he came back from being infiltrated by them in Seattle. Oh, we can have one on every corner. They often have them everywhere. But they're also selling a great big bucket of coffee, like you needed two hands to lift it up. And I remember saying it like, we're in Melbourne, and I know you're all over Australia, but Australia is a much more sophisticated coffee. They don't drink this great big buckets of coffee like Starbucks used to do. So they always struggled right from the start, trying to convince Australians to act like Americans and drink buckets of gallons of coffee. So their franchising thing really never worked from the start. Then a certain lady I know decided she'd put them into all the big shopping centres. They paid $200,000 a year for one in High Point. Guess what? They then had a big closure run and they closed them all. So Starbucks has sort of gone up and down for a long time, and I don't think they're ever going to sort it out. But franchising, a lot of times these American ones come out here. We've had quite a lot to do with certain ones. And I've even to the point of was involved with bringing Cinnabon out years ago as a minor partner. And even when I went over there, I had to say to them, we don't have labour at $7 and $8 an hour. And their model was all about, running it at two people on site, $15 an hour. Our rates would be $50 an hour just to run the place. So look, they're the issues I see with the American models coming out here. But look, a lot of American ones have worked very well. In your game, Anytime Fitness, these sort of things have all worked here. But the labour is the one that becomes the issue of the ones that often fail, is because.
Okay, so just moving on, because we're getting very close to 1 o'clock. Jason Stubbings has made a comment. As a mature franchise brand, the use and inclusion of key data points has certainly helped in identification of new opportunities for us, and also made sure that the existing franchisees' business sustain the least amount of impact if we approve a new area. So I guess that goes back to your Spectrum Insurance comment, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And look, I do know Jason quite well. Jason, I'm sure won't mind me saying, works for Collective Wellness, which is Anytime Fitness. And they have always done it reasonably well. Again, with doing some mapping and logic in all the ways they've done their business. And I totally support what he says. And we are in communicado with them at the moment on a few things we can assist them with.
Great. And Samir has said, thank you again for a great presentation. As someone who's worked in the similar domain, he's always enjoyed your presentation. So thanks for that little shout out. I also had a private question sent to me directly asking if Spectrum's mapping was similar to Gap Maps. And I got in touch with Assel in the office, and he said Gap Maps is mostly a mapping company that can provide summary statistics of an area, whereas Spectrum's is a statistics company with advanced mapping skills to customize our analysis to your business. So we are very different, but just with a small overlap. And we can also undertake advanced statistical analysis, prediction modeling, whereas Gap Maps would not provide such services. So, thank you for that.
Let me just comment on that. Gap Maps are friends of ours, and to be honest with you, sometimes we even bought data sets off because they're very good at scraping on a monthly basis websites. Like we had to do stuff on where all the fast foodies were, so it's easy to go to Tim Shaw and get a data set and do it ourselves. But I joke with Tim, I say, we are an analytical company that does some mapping. They're a mapping company that does a bit of analytics. You can make your own decision. We do think Gap Maps are great for the industry as well as we are. I can only say to you that the Mango Maps we showed you has a license of about $1,300 a year, and then it's whatever else it's going to cost for us to get it operational and running for you. How that sits against what some people pay for Gap Maps, I'll let them be the decision part to that.
Yeah.
But we both, the systems aren't similar. Mango Maps is something run out of England. Yeah, and there's another big one in the industry we've been tempted to play with called Cardo DP. One day we may end up moving one of our biggest clients across to it, and we did have a go at that one as well. But Mango Maps is our often one, or Google Maps, which we tend to use.
Thank you,
But
Peter.
that
And
Maps
it's
is-
1 o'clock, so we'll wrap up very, very shortly. Ingrid also mentioned Starbucks had to import all the materials from the US, cups, lids, and the foreign exchange rate fluctuations knock them around as well. Samir had a different question about footfalls data. Do you have access to that information?
Not really. Look, shopping centres do their own footfall. I've danced with a few people that have things around the CBDs of major capital cities, but to be honest, we've played with it a couple of times, but we really haven't felt comfortable to go there. The state, Melbourne City Council have data around footfall around the CBD, but probably used to be about 17 data points, which half the time it was two-way traffic. So they literally had data out of about eight points across the whole CBD of Melbourne. I must say I haven't followed it up lately, but footfall there's some people trying to get it going, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Now, as Dori has put in the chat, we're more than happy to take questions from people after the event, and you can contact Peter directly by phone, by email, whatever's your preferred method. So if you do have to go, we do understand. We'll keep the recording on, and if there's anybody who'd like to unmute and ask a question or provide feedback on what they've found most helpful today, we'd love to hear that. Otherwise, we'll wrap up fairly soon. So unmute if you would like to have something to say and share with the group.
And those that are leaving, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully I've given you a bit of our understanding of what's happening in not just the gym and health industry, but mapping and data and demographics in general. So please fill out your census properly. We don't want to hear you're a Jedi Knight, which has been put out for years. It is valuable data that leads to a lot of good information for all this type of work that we do and you need and want to use in the future. Thank you very much for attending. We'll stay on if anyone wants to ask us any other questions.
Yeah, it looks like we might be wrapping up there.
Yes, Peter. Yeah.
If you'd like to do the closing comments, and Peter, if you'd just like to bring up that last slide.
Sure.
Nice thank you from Alan. Thank you. The next one on. The next slide. Upcoming events, yes. Thank you for that.
So yeah, we'll be at the National Franchising Convention. We'll have a stand like we always do. Anyone who wants to talk about franchising and territories and things like that, we'll have to deal with. I personally am a CFE, a Certified Franchise Executive, so my experiences are pretty wide and broad. So we'll hopefully see people then, and we may even be doing the big, it's a big gym and fitness expo in Sydney that Annabelle thinks we should go to. So we may get to that as well. Thank you very much for joining us. I think you know how to find me. I'm not hard to pick up too many different ways these days. And Sue will be sending a link and a video of all this to your inbox, and hopefully you can share it as you feel appropriate. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep in touch. Take care.
Thank you.